Hello everyone. In this video, I'll be covering demo problem 2, which will enable us to create score tracker. We are going to write code within a script file called record.py, which will accept two command line arguments. The first command line argument is going to be player name. The second command line argument is going to be the latest score for the player. Record.py is going to compute a running average score for the players. We'll be using JSON files to keep track of historical scores for various players. I hope all of you have been able to download record_template.py. Please pause the lecture video here and launch idle editor to open and rename record_template.py to record.py. Also open a terminal or a PowerShell window so that we can execute this program. Let's go through step number 1. Step 1 says copy and paste code for reading JSON file. Switching back to the slide deck, I'm going to copy paste read_JSON function. Step 2 here says copy paste the code for writing JSON file. Switching back to the slide deck one more time, I'm going to copy write_JSON function. Let me paste it into record.py. Observe that we have duplicate import statement for importing JSON module. That is unnecessary and inefficient. So let's get rid of the second import here. I'm going to move on to step 3, which is asking us to process player name and player score as command line arguments using sys module. Let me go ahead and import sys module. For now, I'm going to use the print function call to display the sys.rv list. Switching to the terminal window, let me execute record.py by typing in python 3 space record.py. I'm going to pass Alice as the first argument and 10 as the second argument. Observe that we are getting RV list which contains 3 items here. The item at index position 0 is always going to be the script name, which is record.py in this case. In index position 1, you have the player name, which is Alice, and in index position 2, you have the player score, which is 10 here. Let's keep track of the player name and player score using variables. I'm going to say player underscore name equal to sys.argv of 1 and player underscore score equal to sys.argv of 2. For now, let me use the print function call to display player underscore name and player underscore score. Let's verify whether the program is producing the correct output, which seems to be the case. Let's move on to step 4. Step 4 says define an empty scores dictionary to keep track of player scores. Recall that you have two different ways of creating an empty dictionary. You can type in scores equal to open curly braces, close curly braces, or you could use the constructor function call by typing in dict open parenthesis, close parenthesis. It's a good idea to always write a note to keep track of the key and value that will be stored as part of a dictionary above the dictionary definition line. Observe that I have a note here which is saying the key will be player name and the value will be player scores list. Let's move on to step 5. Step 5 says check if player name is a key in scores dictionary. If that is not the case, create a new key for player name and value as empty list to keep track of that particular player's scores. Let's use the N operator to verify whether player underscore name is not a key in the scores dictionary. Recall that you have two different ways to write this condition. You can say if not player underscore name in scores, or you could say if player underscore name not in scores. What do you want to do? You want to be able to create a new key value pair within the scores dictionary. The syntax for that is scores of some key equal to some value. What will be the key? The key will be the player name here, which is player underscore name. what will be the value? The value will be an empty list. You have two ways for creating an empty list. You can just type in open square bracket, close square bracket, or you could use the constructor function call by typing in list open parenthesis, close parenthesis. Let's move on to step 6 here. Step 6 says add player score to the players list in scores dictionary. What do we want in order to access the player score list? We want to be able to look up the value corresponding to the key, which is player name, correct? The syntax for lookup is dictionary variable name of key, which is going to be player underscore name here. How do we add a new value to a list? We'll have to use the append method call. So I'm going to say dot append. We are going to get the value corresponding to this particular lookup here. So that will get replaced by the list which is keeping track of player underscore name keys score here. So we can use append method called directly on it by typing dot append. What do we want to append? We want to be able to append the latest score for the player, which is part of the variable player underscore scores here, correct? Let me replace the question marks with player underscore score. Let's use the print function call to display scores dictionary, saving the current version of the program. Let me execute it. Observe that we are now getting a dictionary where you have one key value pair. The key is the player name string Alice. The value is a list of string here. What is wrong with the current version? The score is represented using string data type. Why is that the case? Recall that the command line arguments always produce string data type. It is up to us to use an appropriate typecast function. Let me convert the player score into floating point type by typing in float open parenthesis close parenthesis. Saving the current version of the program. Let me try to run it. Observe that now we are getting the floating point value within the list for the score value corresponding to the player Alice here. Let's move on to step 7. Step 7 says create score underscore history.json file and populate that file with empty dictionary. I'm going to use the echo command to create this particular JSON file. So I'll be typing in echo open curly braces close curly braces, then greater than symbol for redirect, and I'll have to type in the file name, which is score underscore history.json here. Let's use the cat command and pass score underscore history.json as argument to verify the contents of that particular file. Observe that we are getting the correct output here. Let's move on to step 8. Step 8 says read score underscore history.json to populate initial scores dictionary instead of the empty dictionary created in step 4. Let's go back to step 4. This is the place where we are creating the empty dictionary. Instead of doing that, we want to be able to use the read underscore JSON function to read the contents of this particular JSON file. Let me capture this JSON file as a variable. I'm going to use the variable as input underscore file here. I'll have to mention the JSON file name within double quotations because that's going to be string data type. Instead of using the dict constructor here, I'm going to use read underscore JSON function call, and I'll be passing input underscore file as argument for this particular function call. That's going to return to me whatever data structure is represented as part of that particular JSON file. Right now we have an empty dictionary, so that's what we'll get when we try to call the read underscore JSON function to read the contents of score underscore history.json. Going back to step 8, we have completed step 8. So let's move on to step 9. Step 9 says calculate average score for that player. We have the player scores as a list. Recall that you can easily sum up the values within the list by using the sum function call. I'm simply going to say sum of the players score list. How do we get the player score list? We'll have to perform the lookup operation on the scores dictionary. So I'll have to say scores of player underscore name to get the corresponding player's score list. This is going to be the numerator for calculating average. What's going to be the denominator? We want to divide that by the number of scores. That is simply going to be len of scores of player underscore name here. Let me use the print function call to display the result of this particular average computation. Saving the current version of the program, let's try to execute the program by passing Alice and 10 as command line arguments. Observe that we are getting the running average as 10.0. That's because we only have one score. What do you think will happen if we pass 20 as the score for Alice? That's not going to change the average in any way to consider the previous score for player Alice. That's because we're not keeping track of history yet. We need to write contents into scores underscore history.json file to be able to keep track of historical scores for players. Let's move on to step 10. Step 10 says at the end of the program, write the updated scores from the dictionary into scores underscore history.json file. What is our dictionary? That's going to be scores here. Let's scroll up to write underscore JSON function definition. You need to provide two arguments. First is going to be the name of the file or the path location to the file into which you want to write the data structures data. The second variable is going to be the variable which is keeping track of your data structure here. The second argument is going to be the scores dictionary. What should be our first argument? We just want to write the scores dictionary's content into scores underscore history.json file, correct? So I'm going to use write underscore JSON function by calling it with input underscore file as first argument. Recall that we stored the JSON file into a variable called input underscore file. The second argument is going to be the scores dictionary variable here. Let me go ahead and save the current version of the program. Let's try to execute the program by passing Alice and 10 as command line arguments. We are getting average as 10 here. What if we pass Alice 20 as command line arguments? Observe that we are now getting average of 15.0, which is the correct average between 10 and 20. Let me show you the contents of score underscore history.json file. Observe that now we have the player name here, which is key Alice, and the corresponding list of scores, which are the floating point value of the scores that we passed as command line arguments. What if we pass another player as Bob and the corresponding score as 10? Let's look at the content of score underscore history.json. Observe that we now have another key entry. I think I typed in A Bob instead of Bob. That should be fine. Let me show you one more player to make sure that I fix that. So I'm going to type in Meena 20. That should create a third key. Somehow the character A keeps getting added to the front of my key here. I'm going to try this one more time. I'm going to type in python 3 record.py and I'm going to say vn40. Let's take a peek at score underscore history.json's content. Thankfully, this time that didn't get prepended by the A. I think I had some issue with the previous execution of the command. Looks like we are able to keep track of the historical player scores by writing the current updated version of the scores dictionary into the JSON file. What if I tried to add one more score for Vn here by passing 10 as the second command line argument? My running average for Vn is now going to become 25, which is the average between 40 and 10 here. I'll wrap up this video here. There are additional challenge demo problems for you to go through on your own if you're interested. That will be it for today's lecture.